January 29th, 1990. A 3-year-old girl wakes up to a sound that will haunt her for the rest of her life. A gunshot. Loud, terrifying, echoing through a small house in Morgantown, Indiana. She runs to her mother's bedroom with her siblings. What they find defies every law of physics, every principle of forensic science, and every ounce of common sense. Their mother, Dawn Caraveo, lies face down on the bedroom floor. Dead. A shotgun wound to her abdomen. But here's where it gets impossible. The shotgun is underneath her body. Think about that for a moment. How does someone shoot themselves in the stomach with a shotgun, then somehow fall forward on top of the weapon? Within hours, without investigation, without forensic analysis, without even dusting for fingerprints, authorities ruled it suicide. Case closed. Move along. Nothing to see here. But 35 years later, Dawn's children refuse to move along. They've uncovered evidence so compelling, so damning, that Indiana State Police have done something they rarely do. They've reopened a decades-old case. This is the story of Dawn Caraveo. A story of domestic violence, investigative failures, and a family's relentless pursuit of truth. A story that exposes how easily murder can be disguised as suicide when nobody's looking close enough. Dawn Elaine McCoy was born on March 6, 1959 in Kokomo, Indiana. By 1990, she was 30 years old, a mother of 4 children, fighting to build a better life for her family. But Dawn wasn't just any mother. She was a survivor. A woman who had endured domestic violence at the hands of her boyfriend, yet somehow found the strength to dream of escape. Just 9 days before her death, Dawn made a declaration that would prove prophetic. She told family members she wanted to leave her abusive relationship and return to her hometown of Kokomo with her children. 9 days. That's all the time she had left. Dawn lived at 390 East Washington Street in Morgantown with her 4 children. Today, that address is nothing but a vacant lot. But in 1990, it was home to a family trying to survive. Her daughter Jennifer, now an adult fighting for justice, remembers her mother as feisty, determined, someone who didn't give up easily. The morning of January 29th started like any other. Dawn's children were asleep in their beds. The house was quiet. Then came the gunshot that changed everything. Jennifer Gatz, Dawn's youngest daughter at just 3 years old, remembers waking to that terrifying sound. She didn't understand what it was, only that it was loud and it scared her. She and her siblings found their mother in the bedroom, face down, with a shotgun underneath her body. Now here's where this case becomes a masterclass in how not to investigate a death. The Morgantown Town Marshal and Morgan County Sheriff were the investigating agencies. But here's what they didn't do. They didn't dust for fingerprints. They didn't conduct blood spatter analysis. They didn't perform bullet trajectory analysis. They didn't test Dawn's hands or feet for gunshot residue. They didn't even write a proper police report. In fact, when investigators recently tried to find documents from the 1990 investigation, the Morgantown town attorney Lee Robbins had to email them with shocking news. Quote, "There are no documents related to Dawn Caraveo. Our assumption is that he did not investigate. The 1990 town marshal is now deceased, taking any answers with him to the grave." Think about what this means. A woman dies from a gunshot wound, and the investigating officer apparently conducts no investigation whatsoever. No documentation, no evidence collection, no forensic analysis. Just a quick decision that it was suicide, case closed. But Dawn's family knew something was wrong from the very beginning. As Jennifer Gatz puts it, they treated it as a suicide from the very beginning. They're supposed to treat it as a homicide until they can prove otherwise. If you're finding this case as compelling as I am, and you want to see more deep dives into cases where justice has been denied, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. We're just getting started with this story. And trust me, it gets even more shocking. Let's talk about the forensic impossibilities in this case. According to data from the Indiana Department of Health, between 2018 and 2022, 4,262 Indiana residents died by suicide using firearms. Of those, 454 used shotguns. But here's the crucial detail. Only 8 shotgun suicide deaths involved wounds to the abdomen, and every single one of those 8 victims was male. 0 females. Dawn Caraveo would have been a statistical anomaly. A woman shooting herself in the stomach with a shotgun, then somehow falling forward on top of the weapon. The physics alone should have raised red flags. When someone shoots themselves with a shotgun, the force typically pushes them backward, not forward. The weapon doesn't end up underneath the body. But in 1990, in small-town Indiana, nobody asked these questions. Nobody ran the tests. Nobody looked deeper. For 33 years, Dawn's case remained closed. Her children grew up knowing their mother's death had been mishandled, but feeling powerless to do anything about it. Then, in 2023, something changed. Jennifer Gatz started therapy and began processing her mother's death in a new way. She couldn't accept the suicide ruling and she needed answers. That's when she discovered Indiana's Senate-enrolled Act 177, a new law that allows families to request reinvestigation of deaths they believe were the result of criminal acts. For the first time in decades, there was a legal pathway to reopen Dawn's case. But here's what makes this law particularly relevant to Dawn's case. Despite dozens of requests from families across Indiana, the state had yet to reopen or reinvestigate a single case under this new legislation. Families were submitting written requests to Indiana State Police, explaining their reasonable suspicions, but getting nowhere. Jennifer wasn't deterred. She gathered documentation, connected with investigative reporters, and built a compelling case for why her mother's death deserved a second look. She contacted WRTV Investigates, telling them, "I knew that I needed help." The evidence Jennifer and her siblings compiled is staggering. The complete lack of investigation in 1990, the physical impossibility of the scene, the statistical rarity of female shotgun suicides with abdominal wounds, Dawn's history of domestic violence, and her stated intention to leave her abuser just days before her death. But Jennifer didn't stop there. She launched a comprehensive advocacy campaign that would eventually catch the attention of state authorities. She created a website called Justice for Every Family, started social media campaigns, and launched a petition on change.org calling for legislative reform. The petition outlines 3 specific legislative measures named after Dawn. The Dawn Caraveo Death Investigation Reform Act would require external agencies to handle death investigations in small jurisdictions where conflicts of interest might arise. The Dawn Caraveo Staged Suicide Training Mandate would require law enforcement to receive specialized training on recognizing staged suicides. The Dawn Caraveo Suicide Record Accountability Act would classify all suicide investigation records as permanent, preventing crucial evidence from being lost or destroyed. These aren't just feel-good measures. They address systemic problems that allowed Dawn's case to be bungled in the first place. In small communities, investigators often know everyone involved. Personal relationships can compromise objectivity. Limited resources mean crucial forensic tests might not be performed, and when records aren't permanently retained, families lose their chance for justice years down the line. Jennifer's advocacy efforts began gaining traction. The petition exceeded 1,500 signatures. Supporters shared stories of similar cases where deaths were hastily ruled suicides without proper investigation. A pattern emerged of small-town law enforcement failing to properly investigate suspicious deaths, particularly those involving domestic violence. Then came the breakthrough that nobody expected. After years of advocacy, after building public pressure, after demanding accountability, something unprecedented happened. In a development that marks a major victory for the family and could set precedent for other cold cases, Indiana State Police officially announced they were reopening Dawn Caraveo's case. This reopening represents something remarkable. It means that after 35 years, someone is finally going to look at the evidence with fresh eyes, modern forensic techniques, and proper investigative protocols. It means Dawn's children might finally get the answers they've been seeking for more than 3 decades. If this story is resonating with you, if you believe families deserve answers and justice shouldn't have an expiration date, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. Cases like Dawn's show us why we can never stop fighting for truth, no matter how much time has passed. But the reopening of Dawn's case is just the beginning. Jennifer and her siblings aren't just seeking justice for their mother. They're working to prevent other families from experiencing the same nightmare. Their legislative proposals could fundamentally change how suspicious deaths are investigated in Indiana and potentially serve as a model for other states. The Dawn Caraveo case exposes uncomfortable truths about our justice system. It shows how bias, incompetence, and indifference can allow murderers to walk free. It demonstrates how domestic violence victims can be failed not just in life but in death. And it proves that sometimes, the only way to get justice is to refuse to give up, no matter how long it takes. Today, Dawn Caraveo's children are no longer powerless 3-year-olds waking up to gunshots. They're adults with voices, platforms, and determination. They've turned their trauma into advocacy, their pain into purpose. They've forced a system that failed their mother to finally pay attention. The question now is whether this reopened investigation will finally deliver the truth that's been buried for 35 years. Will modern forensic techniques reveal what 1990 investigators missed or ignored? Will Dawn Caraveo finally get the justice she was denied? One thing is certain. Her children won't stop fighting until they get answers. They've already accomplished what seemed impossible, forcing authorities to reopen a decades-old case. They've built a movement that could change how death investigations are conducted across Indiana. Dawn Caraveo was 30 years old when she died. She had dreams of a better life, plans to escape her abuser, 4 children who needed her. Instead, she became another statistic, another domestic violence victim whose death was swept under the rug by a system that failed her. But her story isn't over. Her children are making sure of that. They're ensuring that Dawn Caraveo's name becomes synonymous not with a covered-up death, but with a fight for justice that changed everything. In death, Dawn may finally get what she was denied in life: protection, investigation, and truth. The reopening of this case sends a message to every family who's been told their loved one's suspicious death was suicide. It tells them not to give up, not to accept inadequate answers, not to let time diminish their demand for justice. Sometimes, persistence pays off. Sometimes the truth does come out. And sometimes, a mother who couldn't have killed herself finally gets the investigation she deserved 35 years ago.